Welcome to Sim UK. Ride 2 is the latest release from developers Milestone, who previously brought us the MotoGP series, MXGP 1 and 2, plus a handful of rally games like Sebastian Loeb Rally Evo. Milestone has some pretty decent releases in their early days. In recent years, however, Milestone have been accused of rebranding the same game with little or no development or advancement to speak of. The quality of their final products have been questionable, and promised updates consistently fail to materialise. With little in the way of competition, the general feeling is that there is limited incentive for them to change. I owned both MotoGP 15 and the first edition of Ride, and despite its beautiful scenery and plethora of motorbikes to choose from, the game felt unloved, unrealistic, unfinished and uninspired. So my predictions for Ride 2 were in a similar vein. Ride 2 was released on the 6th of October 2016 for Xbox One, PS4 and PC. It costs between £20 to £35, and alongside its release there are 2 additional add-ons available, which will cost you another £6. The core game is 33GB in size, which is actually 2GB smaller than its predecessor, and minimum specs demand Windows 7 64-bit, DirectX 10 and 4GB of RAM, plus an NVIDIA GT 640 or above. Ride 2 boasts the following features: over 200 bike models from 18 of the world's most important manufacturers in multiple categories, 30 different tracks, over 1,200 customizable parts and over 600 liveries. Ride 2 also boasts a greater emphasis on social interactions, although today the online pickings were pretty slim. As there really is no other company competing against Milestone at present, the only game available that I can logically compare it against is that of its predecessor, Ride. When you load the game, you are immediately presented with the options screen, which looks dated and sets a bad precedent. The options available are limited, and there appears to be no auto-detect option either. Default settings appear to be set very low, perhaps something you might expect to see from the era of the 90s rather than a new release in 2016. Once the game starts, however, the initial loading screen is both simple and effective, and somewhat pleasing to the eye, although the sound file which accompanies it is lackluster and synonymous with the poor sounds which shipped with the original Ride. Why on earth they chose to use the audio sound file of the electric starting up and not the engine, I will never know. They do, however, use the sound file of an engine starting as soon as you click to progress, but the loading symbol pops up midway through and it completely destroys any feeling of warmth that sound can otherwise conjure. Your first job is to enter your personal data, and whilst doing this you will be accompanied with an introduction to Ride 2 from a lady with a very nice voice.
Whatever your goal is, if you're here then you're one of us. Bikes are your passion. Welcome to Ride 2.
The options available to you here are limited to your gender, your name, nationality and skin colour, all of which are obviously critical to the game's initial configuration. Once you have passed the initial inspection, you progress straight into a race meet. The loading time is quite long, but was considerably less frustrating as I was distracted with the model of a Yamaha YZF R1 and relevant bike information. It worked on this occasion, but I doubt it will work indefinitely.
There's no point waiting any longer. This race in the Greek hills will let you know if you've got what it takes.
The race is set in the idyllic Greek hills, riding the aforementioned R1, and it appears to be compulsory. For new players especially, there is little time to work out your buttons, and you are somewhat thrown into the deep end, which is fine for me, but perhaps daunting for some. Fear not, Ride 2 does inform you of the most important button configurations: acceleration, steering, and front and rear brakes. But interestingly, these appear very briefly and just once, after the race has begun. The racing line is present, however, and it quickly becomes apparent that you are racing in the easiest of the difficulty settings. What isn't so quickly apparent is that this level of difficulty actually brakes for you, and you do not need to touch either of the brakes at all throughout the entire race. That is to say that you are still responsible for steering and racing line, and should you steer towards an immovable object, braking is still advised. All joking aside, Ride 2 immediately feels better than its predecessor, so much so that a comparison between the two is hardly necessary. Within seconds, I was immersed in the game. The game looks very good, just shy of incredible, and my current system limits my FPS to 60, which doesn't do much for the feeling of speed, but it is just enough. Having researched other players' feedback, I can see that this game appears to top out at about 120 FPS, and that's in full HD, which is certainly an acceptable amount for most of us. Bike handling seems to be more realistic, and the bike is far more responsive to my commands. However, there does appear to be a staggered approach to the amount of lean that is available, and on occasion, I found that the angle I wanted was found in between those provided. I am a self-confessed rookie, but as soon as I discovered that the game was braking for me, I was able to absolutely hammer it round the track and thoroughly enjoy every moment, to the point that I stopped talking and became totally focused on the win. This is a great feature for newcomers to the genre and to biking as a whole, because it allows anyone to experience the highs without needing to know, understand or worry about the technique and timings required. With a solid second place finish, it was time for me to check out the replay. Again, improvements here were immediately evident. I was initially looking to see if the bikes appeared grounded or were floating just above the tarmac, a terrible bugbear from the original ride. I was pleased to see that the bikes looked more realistic and suggested the idea of weight and poise as one would expect. The scenery was impressive, but an interesting focusing technique on the camera slightly dampened the aesthetics. Game audio, and in this instance bike audio, is an incredibly important aspect to any game, and contributes enormously to the immersion element. I think, though the bike audio has been improved, I still feel much more can and should be done to make this game sound more like the real thing. Perhaps this message has not quite reached milestone.
A bike's soul reflects its rider's personality. Which bike are you?
For me, this was as simple as buttering bread, because the one and only bike I have ever owned was a Honda CBR 600. So as soon as I saw the NSR, nostalgia kicked in, and I was in my own little happy place.
Minimalist lines without losing out on performance.
Ride 2's in-game menu system appears to have been overhauled. It looks modern, it is fast and responsive, and as a result, it is now both pleasing to use as well as look at. The game options appear limited, but the majority of what you want to see is there. One thing you cannot do is change the screen resolution whilst in-game, but in fairness, that is something that you probably won't want to do often. Ride 2 has also dramatically enhanced its level of customization across the board. Rather than choosing between 3 riding styles, you can now create 3 bespoke riding styles of your own choosing. This is achieved by manipulating intricate rider position and style. It is not full-blown customization, but it is certainly a massive step in the right direction. The same applies to bike customization, with an enormous number of customization options available. There are over 600 liveries, and who's to say that more won't be on their way? The original Ride game had 31 tracks in total, and they were a mixture of real and fictional, which was great. This time round, I was hoping for a greater selection and also desperately hoping for the TT mountain track. Unfortunately, Ride 2 has the same number of tracks, has reduced the number of fictional ones, and saddest of all, does not contain the TT mountain course. That being said, there are some classic tracks available like Donington and Nuremberg. For players like me who prefer British road racing tracks, there is some solace thanks to the inclusion of 2 British-based road courses set in Wales and Ireland. The tracks themselves are pretty good, if perhaps a little too flat and unremarkable. They are challenging at times, and will undoubtedly offer great entertainment in multiplayer mode. Perhaps in time the TT mountain course will be included as a DLC. I for one would be extremely tempted at the right price. One feature which isn't currently available and would be a tremendous improvement to the game would be to allow people to create tracks of their own and add them to the Steam Workshop. If nothing else, this would enable the game to extend its playability beyond the scope that it currently has. So, is Ride 2 the game that we have all been waiting for? No, it isn't. Not quite, at least. Certainly advances have been made, and this game is a massive step towards the game we were all hoping it would be. It is aesthetically pleasing, packed with content and customization, and above all, it is fun to play. Is this a simulator? Undoubtedly, no it is not. But then I don't think Ride 2 is trying to be a simulator, which in my opinion is a shame. Hardcore bikers will simply not respect this game due to its lack of realism, and younger players will grow tired of it because there are not enough hardcore bikers available to compete against online. Overall, I am happy with Ride 2, in context with where it started. I think much more can be done with this game now, and I hope that modding restrictions on track creation are lifted sooner rather than later. Would I recommend this game to you? Well, that would depend on what you want from the game. If you are looking for hardcore simulated experience, then I'm sorry, this game probably isn't for you. If, however, you can overlook its limitations, Ride 2 is fun to play and a tremendous step towards something truly amazing. For the time being at least, with limited alternatives, Ride 2 is my go-to ride of choice. My name is Mike, this is SimUK. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you'd like to see more, then subscribe.